Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Cover One Buffalo. Tonight it's just Eric and myself. How you doing tonight, Eric?
What's going on, Aaron?
Recovering from the draft. I'm sure you are trying to as well, but I'm sure you're taking a moment here to be with us after digging in film the last whatever it's been since the draft.
Yeah, it's been obviously that's a grind. The draft season's a grind. Trying to get all the film in and get as much games under your belt on specific prospects that you think, the Bills are going to draft. So that was a grind in itself. But honestly, I like the post-draft better because then I get to watch a film from a different perspective. I get to watch a film of these guys and the schemes that they played in, kind of do a little background of, the different positions and roles they played for their team. So to me, that's more fun to me. It's more of it's not the college, area scouts. It's more of like the pro personnel side, the pro side, where you're kind of seeing how these guys are going to fit in. And I'm sure the fans love that.
Yeah, and absolutely, you get to now see guys that are Bills, right? You're not casting a wide net and saying who are the Bills going to target. These guys are all now Bills, and you get to see how and help us as fans understand how they're going to fit in to what the Bills are trying to accomplish here now and beyond. So before we get into it, we're going to run through the draft picks and get kind of Eric's opinion and get my opinion on them as well. Before we get into it, though, I just want to remind everybody to follow, like, subscribe on all of our social media platforms. You can find us on iTunes, anywhere you get your podcasts. Go ahead and drop us a review there. And don't forget to download the app, the Cover One app. Right now, we're trying to track all the undrafted free agents. That's something that's fun for a lot of people. And when we do that, we send out those push notifications. So if you have the app, you're going to get those notifications first and be right on that. So don't forget to download that. That's on iOS and Android devices. And let's get right into it, man. So big lead up to the draft. A lot of talk about Josh Allen. Albright was saving people's tweets at him, and he ended up being right. Bills trade up to 7, and they take the big arm quarterback Josh Allen, a guy that we've all been hard on, but now he's our guy. So, instead of being hard on him and telling us how bad of a prospect is, tell us and the fans what Allen needs in Buffalo to succeed and be the prospect we need him to be.
Well, first of all, you got to give props to, the front office altogether. Obviously they spent a whole year scouting all of these guys, and Bean was patient. There was a trade in place to move up, and we would have had to give up a lot more. So the fact that we only had to give up, our 2 second-round picks to get Allen, I think that was a win because it opened up the rest of the draft. And that, we're going to talk about Tremaine Edmonds. I mean, this guy could be a stud. So I think that from all reports, they got their guy. They didn't have to give away a lot, and that's something that we all were, kind of worried about, of giving away a farm and kind of settling. We were kind of mentally prepared to trade away a bunch of picks to get our franchise guys. So I give props to Bean for being patient and, working the board in his first draft. But, Allen, obviously he's a work in progress. There's a lot of things you can like about him. There's a lot of things that he needs to work on. So from all reports, and we can see a bunch of video on YouTube and whatnot of him on the whiteboard and how he had total control of that offense at Wyoming, changing protections, moving guys around, switching formations. And I think, even though he needs help and time to develop the mental processing side of it, there's no denying some of the talents that he does have. And so it's up to this staff to develop, right? We always talk about that, Aaron. It's up to these coaches to develop, to teach. And whether it's, he starts day one or game one, I think there's a good core of coaches and teachers in place to kind of mold this offense and this franchise around Allen, because he's obviously what they think is a franchise quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see what they do this year.
Absolutely. And you kind of talked about, his offense in Wyoming. And one thing I want to ask you a little bit, because we know he's behind the ball on some of his mechanics. He didn't play at a big high school, right? He went to JUCO, didn't get a ton of teaching there. So he's taken a different route to get to this point. But a lot of the times when you hear these GMs talk about quarterbacks out of college, they're playing in these offenses that are considered gimmicky offenses, even though it's kind of making its way into the NFL. But the fact that like you said, he was able to change plays at the line and call audibles. Do you feel like that gives him a nice platform to come in the league? Now he only has to work on, keeping that consistency in his footwork, things like that. Like, he's already got that part of the game, and now he's got to work on just getting it consistent. Or does he still have a lot to work on, learning NFL offenses?
Well, the good thing about Daboll's system is that it kind of it shortens the verbiage, the language of the offense. So regardless of what type of offense they build, whether it's around Allen or around McCarron, it's going to be the same offense regardless. It's just, a few different plays here or there and packages. But the transition is going to be a little easier for him because he's going to be used to, NFL style play calls. So then the little things that he can focus on are not necessarily the verbiage and trying to spit that play out. It's more about his drop, the speed of his drop, the depth of his drop, where his eyes are prior to throwing it. And so little things like that help a quarterback adjust that much quicker, I think will help him come, for his first year in the NFL.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit too, because I think right after he was drafted, they talked about Daboll having a plan in place for Allen with the offense. And some people took that to mean that maybe there would be two different offenses, so that when Allen comes in, he's running a particular offense versus what AJ and Nate maybe are going to run. I didn't take it that way. Maybe you could kind of enlighten us on how you took that comment to be. What's going to be the difference when Allen's in versus AJ and those guys?
I think it's still going to be a ball control offense, regardless of McCarron or Allen's in there. They're still going to lean on Shady, and they should, because we don't have quite the weapons yet overall as far as receiving threats. So I think it's still going to be a ball control offense. I think they're going to run the ball a lot, and and you saw a bunch of these plays, they're going to try to use play action. And when you look at the Bengals last year, McCarron as the backup in Cincinnati, they were one of the top 5 teams when it came to play action pass. So I think, and if you look at my scouting report, when it comes to Allen, his best scheme fit, the thing I said was in year 1 and year 2, the offense that he goes to has to have a strong run game because they're going to have to lean on him to use those play action fakes so that they can stretch the field vertically, especially if they don't have the weapons that can separate. So they have to find ways with concepts, with the offense schematically to get guys open. And one of those ways is to, run the ball, get those guys to stack the box and get those one-on-ones outside, which Allen can complete.
Yeah, and Allen's actually got a really nice play action game and like his pump fakes and play action. I love his wizardry, I would call it, with that. So that would be a nice fit for him. Now, as far as his mechanics, are you as worried about some of it? I mean, I look at some of his tape and he's right on with a lot of his throws. Just a lot of things aren't going well. His offensive line doesn't block. And then he gets totally inconsistent. How worried should we be about the consistency of his mechanics?
Well, I mean, for a guy that has always relied on his physical abilities, there is concern. There is cause for concern because, when the pressure's on, he is going to want to fall back on those mechanics. And we always talk about quarterbacks that, won a lot of games in college, the Tim Tebow's of the world, that they tried fixing his mechanics in the NFL and it just didn't work because your muscle memory just resorts back to what you're used to doing. And for a guy like Allen, he's always relied on that the physical attributes that he has, the natural, born gifts that he has, that sometimes he does forget about that. And in college, it was probably enabled even more because there wasn't too much around him as far as, D1 type talent, FBS talent. So he played a lot of hero ball and he got sloppy, but they let him get away with it because he was the team. He was special in a lot of times when he wanted to extend plays and whatnot. So, but if he has those feet tied to his eyes, and you saw flashes of it last year, there's no denying that he can be special. It's just trying to get those reps, those consistent reps, play in and play out, is going to be the coach's job. Yeah,
and there's been a little bit of a discussion on Twitter about this. And I want to get your view as somebody that's been around a lot of different players and done some coaching yourself is, how long does that type of thing take before a coach feels comfortable? Is it going to happen in preseason and training camp, or is this something that takes a year? Is it a year and a half? Or is it just kind of dependent on the guy? How long is this stuff to take for you to feel comfortable that you've changed and got his mechanics consistent enough that he's not going to revert back?
Oh, it's going to take, a couple years, honestly, because, just look back into someone that played in the similar offense in Carson Wentz. That first year early on, he was good with his mechanics. And then towards the end, he started pushing it too much. He got sloppy with his mechanics and his play fell off. So, and then you saw him come in this year and he was on fire because it's something, again, you have to stay on top of it. The quarterbacks, coaches, the offense coordinators have to stay on top of it because it's not his muscle memory yet. Right. So it's going to take time. It's going to take structured coaching, every single day. It's something he's going to have to work out every single day. But I think, he comes across as a type that He has no problem putting in that work. And
he seems like a hard worker. Yeah.
And we saw him from the time the season ended, from the time he was drafted, a lot of the workout videos and all that. And I know it's combine, I know it's pro days, but you saw that his accuracy was a lot better when his feet were tied perfectly to his arm and his eyes. So
and so one last question then on Allen here with that is, can you accomplish that in practice environment when you're trying to prepare for opponents every week? Or is that something that he needs to get in and play and practice that in a game environment? What's your take on that?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think if he's repping it every day, that's one thing. I think if he gets thrown in early, I think that could hinder that progression, because then he's going to start pushing it and he's going to get sloppy again. So I personally don't think he should start year one, but if he wins a competition, I'm not going to be mad at it because he's earned it, So
sure.
I think this staff is, they've always drafted the last couple of years. They've drafted guys that have a lot of playing experience, and seniors and guys that had production in their college careers, played multiple years. And so I think when we talk about Allen, even though he was a senior and he played in the Senior Bowl, he went a different route. So he doesn't have too much college experience when it comes to game time. So I do think that it is something that he's going to have to work on at practice. He's going to have to work on before and after practice. It's something that is just going to have to become part of his daily routine. But you throw him in, man, I mean, it's playing with fire. It really could.
For sure, yeah.
It could ruin a guy like that, because as competitive as he is, as naturally talented as he is, he's going to want to push it. He's going to want to, he's going to want to win. Yeah. And so that's kind of a fragile state when you're a guy coming from a team like Wyoming.
Yeah, there's always been an argument about that, about confidence. I'm a big believer in that. A guy's confidence can be shaken and it can destroy his career. I've seen it in basketball happen. Guy miss a big shot and just never recovers, things like that. We do have a question here. Kevin C is asking, and this is in relation to Josh Allen, and then we'll kind of move on because we do got the 7 picks to get to. How is the Senior Bowl tape from Josh Allen compared to the season tape? Did you notice any mechanics being better? Is the mechanics better? I know you're ripping into that tape, so I don't know if you've gotten any comparisons yet, but if you have, let us know.
Yeah, I mean, it was something we saw live when we were down there, because going in, everyone was talking about the completion percentage. Of course, we all know that that's worn out, but and we were talking about the footwork. And the other big narrative was his touch, that he was always, just throwing it with too much velocity. He had no touch. Well, I'm sorry, man. The whole week, and then you saw it in the game. I know it's the Senior Bowl game, but you saw some of that touch in that game. And he was just dropping dimes. And arguably, I thought he was one of the top 3 or 4 players in the game itself. I thought during the week, Baker was the alpha. Baker Mayfield was the alpha and probably one of the better players during the week as far as quarterbacks go. But I thought in the game, man, Josh Allen showed some special traits.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was nice to be able to see him have a little bit of an off speed, because you just hear about the size of the arm. But now a guy that, the Bills were able to move up a second time. I didn't see it coming. I thought we were going to just sit there until 22 and be lucky to keep that pick. But Brandon Beane gets really aggressive and goes up and gets a guy to fill a big hole on this team. So you're filling 2 big holes and possibly building the future of this team in your first round of this draft. Tremaine Edmonds, a guy that I was not really thinking about, because I just didn't think, at 12 he wouldn't be there. So I didn't give him much thought. I know a guy that you liked on tape, but I felt like you felt the same way. We weren't going to get him. There he is. He falls right to 16 for us. So tell me about this guy, because I'm crushing pretty hard watching the highlights and watching the tapes I've seen.
It's scary because when I started watching Edmonds, I watched, I think, 2 or 3 games prior to the draft, and I was with you. I mean, obviously, we're big Roquan fans. I thought Roquan was LB1. Edmonds was, right behind him. Not too far behind him, but behind him. But just kind of different creatures when you're talking about the linebacker position. I also, like Roquan, I didn't really expect Edmonds to be there, and especially the way the board fell in regards to the trading up and whatnot. So Edmonds is scary, man. He really is, with his size, his speed, and his length. I mean, his length is just scary for when you try to project that to the middle linebacker position, because you see it right here. He's in the middle of the line of scrimmage right here, and he's just immediately gets his hands out, leads with his hands, and that's what good linebackers do: lead with their hands and uses those long arms just to disengage and bring down the back. So. And when you talk about Edmonds, it's his closing speed, sideline to sideline. He's going to help in the passing game too. And this is something I brought up prior to the draft is, with his length, he's going to affect passes. Like you see him here. He's going to affect passing lane, especially over the middle, for teams that want to attack us over the middle because of his length. I mean, he's getting his hands up. He affects that passer. The pass ends up being behind the receiver because of Edmonds being in that window. So he can affect the game in so many different ways. Obviously, can play several different positions. Again, this is him in the middle of the field getting a pass deflection here in the fourth quarter against Duke. He just, honestly, when it comes to third down, you see this is fourth down. He's going to do so many things for this defense because obviously he can match up with anyone, and that includes receivers, Aaron. Yeah. He can erase positions. So if a team wants to come out on third down in a 3-by-1 trip set, he can literally line up and the backside running back. He can line up on the front side versus tight ends or receivers. I mean, McDermott and Frazier they must be over the moon on this guy because they can do so much with him when it comes to those critical third downs.
Yeah, something they struggled on, right? And when you look at our division, teams like the Patriots, you need to be able to stop that, and you have to have the versatility because they have guys like Gronk that present you those matchup issues. Now, I guess my only worry with Edmonds is, he's 19. The nice thing about that is he's going to gain some muscle. He's going to keep developing physically, so that's great. Yeah. But can you tell me, are you seeing on tape, do you think he has the ability to jump into this defense and be the guy that's calling the defense? Does he have that type of mental processing? Is it available on tape to see?
Absolutely. There's for a few reasons. Obviously, yes, he is young, but a few things that I noticed on film is, we saw early in the season, and when you compared it to the end of the season, he progressed. He didn't make the same mistakes. So early on in the season versus West Virginia, he's blowing his run fits. He's not sticking to his keys. By the end of the season, you saw him, clicking and closing, not even having to think about it. It became natural to him. So I like the fact that he can learn from his mistakes. And it was not just from game to game, but from, drive to drive and half to half. The other thing is, he was coached at Vatech by one of the best coaches in all of college football, Bud Foster. And Bud Foster worked with this guy day in and day out as a linebackers coach. And to me, you're not really getting much better coaching than that at the collegiate level. So you add that to, he's going to be coached by Bob Babbage, right? By the Bills. He's a well-respected linebackers coach too, has had experience with, the Urlachers and whatnot at that position. So I do think he can come in and he can call a defense. He admitted that he did call a lot of the calls and help adjust coverages and whatnot. So I do think, even though he's young, I think he's mentally older in that sense. He's more mature, but he's going to have an ups and downs. But when you can do things like this, what we're seeing on the screen, Aaron,
oh my God, yeah,
carry that wheel route down the field, or you see him in the middle of the field here. This guy's going to be patrolling the middle of the field. Look at him in the middle of the field here. This turns into man coverage, and he's a safety range. Look at the range there. It's crazy what he can do for our defense.
Yeah, and you tag him up with Milano and just all that athleticism, and guys just fire into the ball. The thing, with the mental processing, before I talked to you here, I wasn't really sure. I've talked to a couple people that, he's only 19. I said, this is a perfect spot for a guy that's that young with that much athleticism, because you have Lorenzo there in the linebacker room with them. You have Kyle Williams on the defense, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. You have some of these guys that are just ballers, and they're all captain. They're all have the ability to be captains and leaders of this defense. So he doesn't have to necessarily be the leader in the locker room to call the plays and stuff like that. So he's in a perfect spot for a young guy to come in and succeed right away.
No doubt about it, man. I'm excited, honestly. And I will be having a video on him in the next week or so. It's just taking some time to cut up because there's so many good plays. Honestly, yeah. He's making a play on every single rep, man. So I'm excited about dropping that video soon.
Yeah, and here's how good he is. I had fans of other teams that I talked to on Twitter all hit me up and said, "Man, we're so jealous of that you got him, and not only that you got him, but you got him at 16. Like, how did that happen?" So another guy super excited to get our hands on. I think will also come in and contribute right away as far as a rotational player on this defense is Harrison Phillips. We talked about him in the pre-draft with Russ. Russ said Kyle Williams Jr. That got me salivating because that's exactly what we need. We got to replace Kyle Williams here in the next couple of years. So perfect time to get him in to play with Kyle Williams. How'd you feel about that pick falling right into their laps at 3?
I honestly, I don't think I was the only one that wasn't surprised that he went to the Bills. I know it was late in the round, but he was tied to the Bills for the longest time, kind of like Josh Allen. But hard worker. Yes, he is that Kyle Williams type. I think he's got that DNA, But
Right.
when we talk about position and where he's going to play,
Sure.
obviously that's not going to be the same. You're going to see him here. He's in what we call a 2I, which is just inside the guard. So he's going to be manning up. And I think the coaches came out and said this week. He's going to be more of a nose tackle. And see, Kyle's more of that 3-tech. So he'd probably be right around in here. But Phillips is going to be more of that occupier. He's going to probably back up Star Latuile a lot. And then, of course, he'll get his reps. He'll get his reps as, maybe the 3rd or 4th D tackle as a pass rusher and a 3-tech. But this is what he's known for. I mean, he's got good hand placement. He leverages his gap really well. He does play a little high at times, but, being a former wrestler, he does know how to, even though he's a little high, he knows how to use his hands and angles to, shed blocks. And you see him numerous times on tape, splitting double teams and whatnot. So I do think he'll add to a healthy rotation. Do I think he's going to be Kyle Williams? No, I don't think he's got the explosiveness out of his stance. I don't think that's just his game, but we talk about personality and DNA. Of course, he is Kyle Williams 2.0.
Yeah, he seemed like just a perfect fit for Buffalo. Everything. I love that, he wrote them a letter, and then you see the conversation that he had with McDermott where a wrestling move was pulled out.
Yeah.
It just seems like, a nice fit. And that is something that the Bills, put a premium on. We've talked about it in podcasts in the past. They put a premium on their guys, their DNA, and he just seems like that guy. And I was a little surprised that he fell that late in the 3rd round, to be honest. Off the board before him that I didn't think maybe are as good. But that kind of 2nd, 3rd round of defensive tackles were all clumped together anyway.
Yeah.
But it made it a little bit nicer not having a 2nd round pick, knowing that they're getting their guy. I don't know if you felt that same way.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, I thought he was tied to the team, and I think where he went was probably about right. I mean, I had him in that, late 3rd or early 4th range. So I think he went where he should have went, just because he's not going to offer too much as far as, getting off the ball and in the pass rush games. See, and you see, talk about his pad level.
He's
here.
high.
He's obviously really high right here, but look at his hands. His hand placement's good. His helmet's in the hole, that's all good. But and it's one of those things where, he's a good fit schematically. He's a good fit. Obviously, there was a tie, and we talked about this pre-draft. The defensive line coach at Stanford was actually a guy that coached under Leslie Frazier. So that tie was. It was everything aligned perfectly, and especially when you talk about the character of this guy. So he's obviously another Buffalo guy through and through, honestly.
Absolutely. And one thing that I only got to watch one cut up of him just because I've been trying to catch up on, all these guys after him. I don't really know much about all of those guys. But I saw the cut up against Notre Dame, and for him to go, with Quentin Nelson, he didn't win a lot of the battles, but he just went head to head with Nelson and made Nelson work. And they're talking about him being a generational come right in and be a really good starter in the NFL. So that was a good test, I thought. And that got me excited that he, it was just 2 bulls going at it. So I'm excited about that pick. But then we get into a pick that I don't know anything about. I was surprised to hear the name. I'm not going to lie, because I didn't hear about him at all throughout this whole draft process. So you're going to have to fill me in here on Teron Johnson out of Weber State, Weber State. Don't even know anything about him. Can you give us something?
Well, he's another guy that, and we'll talk about it, and we've talked about a pre-draft, is that, he played in the Senior Bowl. He's obviously a senior, played in a lot of games at Weber State. We'll see him here, and this is what he's pretty good at. He's good at disrupting and keeping his eyes on the quarterback. This is something that our defensive backs have to be good at. Be good at disrupting during the release and staying on top of that and cutting off routes is something that Trey White is one of the best at already in the NFL. So he's that guy that's played in a lot of games. He's very disruptive. The thing I worry about him is things like this. You see, that was a good play. Had his eyes on the ball the whole time. Ball gets out into the flats. You got to make that tackle. Right. You see that a lot from him. And for a guy that's projecting to play in the slot a lot, you got to be better tackler than that. So lining up and refining that tackling technique is going to need to improve. And we'll see him down here to the field. That he gets smoked on this double move, but I gave him credit because for a guy that runs in the 4.5s, he recovered really, really well. So he gets right back into phase on that receiver, and the safety over the top helps him out. But he's a guy that honestly, I felt like if there was a reach in this draft for the Bills, I felt like he was probably it. But I think it's also one of those things, and especially the way the draft unfolded after him and how we were just drafting corners and we brought in a bunch of corners. I think it was one of those things where they think long-term, this guy could maybe play outside. And so maybe they're like, it's a need right now where we can, put him in the slot, which is a position that he played in a little bit on third downs, but maybe he's going to compete at the slot, and you'll see him here. And this is another thing I worry about. He's got short arms. He's got like 30-inch arms or something like that, but he's also gives up inside moves a lot. And for a guy that's 4'5", when you're scouting cornerbacks, whether they're outside or inside in the slot, if you don't have the speed to close on crossing routes, you're going to get tore up in the NFL. I mean,
guys are going to eat on that all night,
all day. And I understand that he can get protected by, the linebacker level and whatnot, but teams can consistently throw those, quick slants or those, 5-step ins. I mean, just like this. I know the ball doesn't go to the receiver here, but little things like that with him. And here's another play where he's off coverage to the bottom of the screen, and he just doesn't have the length or the speed to close on these passes. So it'll be interesting to see how he holds up, in the slot, because again, I think Leonard Johnson, even though he gave up yards, he was still on point when it came to communication with the linebackers and the safeties.
And he was a sure tackler, like you mentioned.
He was, yes. So I think this guy is a work in progress. And I think if you look at the entire draft, I think of all the guys, he may have been the biggest reach if we're gonna call one out.
Yeah, I would guess that they saw something at the Senior Bowl maybe, and then dug into him a little bit more and thought, hey, this is a guy that we can develop. If there's one position group that I trust right now with McDermott and Frazier, it is the defensive backs, to take guys that are diamonds in the rough and get the most out of them. You saw him do it last year with guys, and there is a position open with the slot cornerback. I know they brought in Gaines, but I'm not sold that they feel like that's a lock at that position. I think they're going to bring in guys. They brought in a ton of undrafted guys. I think they want guys to compete and build up depth so that when a guy goes down, they don't run into the position they had last year where they have nobody to, they take a huge hit at that position. So not a ton to talk about him. I did think that was a reach. What was weird, and we talked about it a little bit pre-draft, is a guy that I like more. I didn't know much about him before the draft process, but now watching him a little bit after the draft process, I like him a lot. Saren Neal. He seemed like maybe not a reach, and maybe like a guy that could be a nice steal here in the 5th round. And very interesting to see what they're going to do with him. I don't know if you can elaborate on your thoughts or theories after watching some of his stuff. What do you think?
Well, when I saw him at the Senior Bowl, he was, he became famous because of how well he was in the face and jammed up James Washington from Oklahoma State, obviously one of the higher draft picks from the receiver position this year. And
that.
I know,
sorry.
He's right here in the slot, and he just cleans up. Of course, I love the hit, but I want to see him wrap up.
Yeah, you got to wrap up.
Neal is a guy, he seems a little tight hip, kind of, kind of tall, kind of a higher cut guy. So he does struggle with some change of direction, some hip fluidity, some transitioning between, back pedal and opening up. And we're seeing these highlights here, courtesy via NFL Draft Diamonds, but there's really not too much film out there. So this is this is highlights. So there's only so much you can actually critique it from. But he's got a long highlight tape because he's a physical guy. He's a guy that played a linebacker. I believe it was 2016. He played linebacker a little bit. And last year he played more of the safety role. And you're going to see him here. And this is a great play because you're going to see the jet action come across here. And the safeties we call it a rock and roll, where this safety is going to roll over the top. And then this safety is going to drop down. And that's Neal right here. Watch this hit. And this is 3rd down. This is 3rd and short. And he lights this guy up. And he puts this guy in the ground. And, he's not getting up from that.
Yeah, so, that guy's going to, yeah.
So I love the physicality. I'm sure the staff does too. Where they use him, we kind of talked about it prior to going live, is McDermott and Frazier have never been guys that played a lot of 3 safety looks. Maybe this is that year. We saw the defense go to a lot of 3-3-5 looks last year. Versus spread teams, the New Englands and whatnot. So maybe they start employing some spread game, defensive concepts that can shut down a lot of these passing teams that want to exploit our defense. Because you think about the defensive backs that they brought in this year with Devontae Davis and some of the guys they drafted, a lot of them are man cover corners. And we played zone coverage 73% last year, Aaron. Right. So there's going to be a shift in the defensive calls that they're going to be having on defense. So maybe they play a little more man, especially when you have Tremaine Edmonds. They're not going to have to worry about Ramon Hubbard on the backside of these formations matching up versus a running back. They have Edmonds now or Milano. So their athletic linebackers have helped them, have opened up the playbook a little more this season. So I'm excited about that. And where Neal fits in, I mean, it's really a crapshoot because the guy is pretty special and he can do a few different things for a defense.
Yeah, I think right away, even if he doesn't get on defense, I think he's going to make a huge impact on special teams. In this highlight video, there's a couple plays, and he just seems like a guy that's going to impact that portion of the game.
And that's it right here, Aaron, I think is what you're referring to. He's a gunner up top.
Yeah. And so that's a great find in the 5th round. You got a guy in the 5th round, you better come in and play teams. And then if you need him, plug him in. But what I noticed from this highlight, and like you said, it's not the game tape, but it's rare do you see the defensive back, a guy that's in lineup at cornerback, be the most physical guy in the field. And that's what I think gets me the most excited.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something the staff is loving about him because, of course, they've always said it, they want their cornerbacks, they want their safeties to have to be good in run support. And especially when we struggled last year, against the run, I think that the emphasis is still there, obviously. And I think if not more, so having guys like Neal that can come up and tackle, especially where you got him in the draft. I was excited when I started watching some of this film. So I'm right there with you. It'll be nice to see where they put him.
Yeah, it'll be a nice project to kind of watch over the summer and see how he develops with NFL talent here. So then we got 2 picks in the 5th round, right? And so they get Wyatt Teller, offensive guard out of Virginia Tech. And I immediately got into our chat with Russ there, who was on the show last time, and asked him, I said, hey, I haven't heard anything about this guy. Can you tell him? And he was like, you guys are awesome. You're very lucky to have gotten this guy. We didn't hear much about him in the pre-draft process. At least I didn't. You heard about the bigger name guards, Hernandez, Nelson. And I don't know how to scout or watch offensive line. I struggle with it. So can you tell us what you've seen from this guy? And can he be a guy that they plug in right away?
I do think he is a guy that could be plugged in at left guard right away. He was, by all accounts, it's not something, obviously Russ scouted offensive lineman, defensive lineman for us. So I only saw a few games before, and then I've obviously been diving in afterwards, but he's just a powerful dude, honestly. Yeah. And I mean, he's the type of guy, you see him executing this down block, and you'll see the finish here on the back end from him. And you saw that a lot in his film. He's finishing, he's nasty, he's playing to the whistle. I would say he's probably a better run blocker at this moment in time than a pass blocker. I love him on these down blocks. I love him skip pulling, something that Dable loves to do. You saw a lot of that on film last year with when he was at Alabama. So you're going to see him skip pulling. You're going to see him leading out in screens, little things like that. And here's a screen where he gets out in front of the play here. So he's got a little mobility. I think he's got the power to anchor against the pass. I think his footwork needs some cleaning up. I think he plays on his toes a little too much. Mm-hmm. And of course, when you play on your toes as an offensive lineman, you're going to bend at your hips, you're going to bend at your waist, and you can easily be thrown off balance. So I do think he can get some work that way, but he's long, he's athletic. I think he'll fit the run scheme when you talk about the inside zone, the more of the vertical push, not the horizontal push that we dealt with last year in the outside zone under Dennison. I think you're going to see a lot more downhill inside zone, obviously power and gap schemes. So I think he's another guy that, he put in the time, he put in the work. That he's a guy that very well could challenge at the left guard position.
Yeah, so I was going to say, as we get into camp here and, start the process of the offseason, getting the whole team together, do you think they slot him right away in at starting left guard, or do you think it's something that they're going to bury him a little on the depth chart and make him earn it?
I mean, based on the way they've coached, I think it's another one of those things, and they say it every time when they're asked about, hey, is he going to be slotted in as the starting Mike linebacker and Tremaine Edmonds? No, I think they're going to make these guys earn it, whether that's just because maybe the talent between him and the guy ahead of him is, close, and they want to give him that ego boost, or the fact that they just want to, they don't want these rookies come in with a big head, man. So,
yeah, sure.
And you see a nice snatch trap here, right here as Teller pulls on the play action pass. Guy tries long arm, and he just, snatch and traps him down. So he's got some skills, man. I do think he can compete, but I don't think they should just automatically plug him in. I was never that type of coach. Yeah. Just because, like I said, you want to make these guys earn it. And regardless of how good they are coming out of college, there's going to be an adjustment period to the game speed. Absolutely.
And yeah, I don't want anything handed to anybody on this team. And I think that's kind of the DNA of both the front office and the coaching staff. So I agree with you, but it would be very nice if your 5th round offensive lineman comes in and makes an impact year one. That to me is a successful draft just in itself. So we'll head over here to the 6th round. This is a pick, man. You might have to sell me on what the Bills are doing here. Ray McCloud, wide receiver out of Clemson, wasn't really used all that much as a wide receiver. I know he's got some stuff, some stats and some highlights of playing wide receiver, but seems more like a special teams kind of pick here. What are they doing here, taking him in the 6th round?
Well, I mean, we know Daboll's system has always, had those gimmick plays, had those jet sweeps, something that he even probably ran more at Alabama last year, because Kiffin still had some of his system there on those orbit motions, which, kind of swinging around, getting the fake run or on those jet sweeps. So the gadget plays, I think he kind of fits into that mold. We see him here at the bottom of the screen and running a nice double move, but but this was his only touchdown last year. So he's the gadget guy. I definitely think he's obviously he's a pretty good returner as well. I think that was more of, and when you look at the undrafted free agents and the draft overall, I think it's one of that slot position, where the Jeremy Curleys are going to play. That's a work in progress, because I think last year we drafted Zay to kind of, him and Jordan Matthews kind of share time in that slot position. That's not Daboll's system. He's not a big slot guy. Right. When he wants to stretch vertically through the slot, he's going to do that through his tight end. So I think Ray McCloud kind of fits in that mold. I think Kalen Clay will get some reps in the slot. And of course, some of the guys that they brought in off the street to kind of compete at the position. I think that's just the regime kind of helping out the special teams, but also trying to find guys that when the ball's in their hand, they can make guys miss. And, and McCloud is kind of that guy where when he gets the ball, he kind of got the build of a running back. So it'll be interesting to see where they slot him. But of course, I think you're right. I think he starts off as mainly a special teamer.
Yeah, it seemed like an interesting pick. Obviously, Bills fans were clamoring for some of the wide receivers with better known names, more guys they think of as outside receivers, thinking that that's the need. I think a lot of Bills fans, including myself, thought Zay was going to come in and be the slot guy this year. But it looks like from both the draft and the undrafted guys like you talked about, they're really trying to fill that slot role. So is Zay going to pop outside a little bit more this year? What should we expect there?
When they drafted Zay last year, you heard me say he's kind of like a 1B. I don't think he was quite a 2. I think long-term they thought of me as like a 1B. But obviously he struggled last year. So he's got a lot of work to do. And something that disappointed me was his route running, obviously aside from his hands, because you got to catch a damn ball. Right. But that's something that his mechanics suffered last year. And I think that it was mainly in his head. But I think he can bounce back this year. I expect him to play more of that flanker role. Where he's off the line of scrimmage, they're motioning him around. They're trying to, motion him into the formation so they can run some of those under routes and hook up underneath in those linebackers and find those zone windows, which he was really good at East Carolina. So I don't think he's a slot guy. Will they use him there sometimes? Absolutely, because I don't think they addressed the tight end position typically to what Daboll likes to have. Because, like I said, Daboll likes to use his tight ends vertically. He likes to use them down the seam. And maybe Logan Thomas steps up and has a better year and is asked of a bigger role of him. But I think right now they're going to have to dink and dunk and find guys to fit some of the roles that Daboll typically uses.
Yeah. So would you say this one was a little bit of a read? I know you said that Johnson seemed like a reach with Quantimus St. Brown still on the board. Is Ray McCloud a little bit of a reach at 6? I
don't think so, because when you're drafting 6th and 7th rounders, the chances that these guys making the actual roster is like 50%. Yeah. So I mean, these aren't guys that are just automatically gimmies, at the 6th or 7th round, especially when you have like a deep draft where a lot of these undrafted free agent guys could, very well push a guy like Ray McCloud not even onto the roster. So I mean, you think about a guy like Cam Phillips, a guy that was very productive at Virginia Tech, but he had a hernia, had surgery, didn't test well. I mean, that guy was way more productive than a guy like Ray McCloud, but he landed, as an undrafted free agent. So McCloud's no lock, regardless if he plays special teams or not. He's no lock. So the chances of a guy like a 6th or 7th rounder making a team, it's not guaranteed. So I think people kind of need to pump the brakes on that whole notion.
Yeah. One guy I do think, though, and was my issue with the Ray McCloud is then in the 7th round, they get Austin Prohl out of UNC, who when I was looking at Mitch Trubisky a year ago when they were looking at quarterbacks. He kept popping out to me then. And then I kind of forgot about him in this draft process because he was hurt last year.
Sure.
And I think he is a guy that could make the team year one. And I think he'd be a nice fit in the slot. What have you seen out of him? Have you been able to watch him at all?
Yeah, I watched a few games of him. It's very limited as far as coaches film. And obviously when you're kind of evaluating receivers and defensive backs, you want to have that full footage. But I mean, you see a nice double move here, and that little suddenness, that little head shake, you see him set up this corner. I mean, that right there is something that Dable loves. I know this is outside. I know this is pretty much a go route. But if you can get that type of suddenness and explosion after that drive step inside and then bounce back outside, that's something you can develop. Obviously, he comes from a good family, good pedigree as far as receivers go. So I think he's another developmental guy, but I just love that they brought in multiple receivers, whether it was through the draft or through undrafted free agency, guys that can compete. Because when you talk about receivers, when you talk about the defensive back positions that are on our team, and we talk about it all the time, Aaron, all it takes is one injury. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have depth at those positions, you're going to struggle on both sides of the ball. You're not going to be able to pass it, and you're not going to be able to stop the pass. So in today's day and age and the way the offense and NFL is set up for offenses, you got to have as many of these guys as you can in your system.
Yeah, and I know fans, on Twitter while the draft was going on were, from Harrison Phillips on, were kind of freaking out about the Bills not taking receiver, and it's still kind of a running joke here. But they have brought in a lot of guys, and you mentioned Phillips. They seem to be a little bit more comfortable with the room overall and are just kind of looking to fill the depth. Is that the kind of, vibe you're getting from One Bills Drive right now, that they seem pretty good with the room and just want to get depth in there, like you said, in case a guy goes down?
Yes. I mean, you gotta also understand that, they're restructuring this roster. Obviously we have a ton of, cap hit this next year, and we're going to have some good money open up eventually, but it's one of those things they have to work with what they can. And, filling depth is huge. And, we were pretty lucky last year. You can't expect the same luck when it comes to injuries. I thought we escaped pretty unscathed last year, and that's part of the reason why we were able to make the playoffs. So
right. If any position got hit the hardest, it was probably wide receiver.
Sure. And that's a position that was already, devoid of top tier talent. So they're going to bring in guys that just are hungry, have a chip on their shoulder, that can play several positions. And they're just going to have to be specific in their game plans and how they operate with these guys, whether in their slot, whether they're in outside. And it's going to be another year, and I know fans don't want to hear it regardless if Elam plays or not. It's going to be another year of close games and playing defense and running the ball. That's our identity right now, and we need to stick to that. And I think Dable will do enough on offense where, I think the run game will get back on track and into things that we do well.
Yeah, I do think the play calling should at least be better and make fans feel a little bit better. I don't know about the overall talent that they have. I kind of agree with you. It's going to be another average year, right around mediocre average year. And I'm not freaking out about the talent that they weren't able to acquire. I like what they did in this draft, especially the top heavy part of the draft. I think they got guys, if they pan out, are the type of guys that change franchises. So the rest of the stuff is going to come, like you said, we have a ton of cap space next year. You still have another 9 picks next year. So even though the Bills made the playoffs, I know that got fans excited. It is a rebuilding thing, and they've told us it's going to be a 2 to 3 year thing right from the start. Dave Bean and McDermott got in here. So, you're going to go into the season having a few positions that aren't quite what you want them to be, and wide receiver might end up being one of those. So, I'm okay with it. Overall, how do you feel the Bills did in this draft process? And I see you got the undrafted list popped up there. We can talk about any of the guys that pop out to you on that too.
Yeah, I think it was a solid draft. I mean, they came in trying to get their quarterback of the future. Bam, they got him. Didn't have to give up a lot to get him. And they got another top 10 player to boot. So, I mean, when you talk about just those first 2 picks, I mean, after that, it was kind of, okay, whatever. Everything's gravy because they got the 2 quarterbacks that they need on both sides of the ball. And we all know that on defense, they got to have that Mike linebacker. And I think Edmonds can, jump in there and, have the growing pains, but I think he can man that defense for years to come. I mean, this kid could be special. And and we saw it over the course of his career, and we saw him progress. I think that give him a year or two, he could be really special, one of the best linebackers in the draft if Babbage can develop him properly. But after that, I mean, the draft was like I said, I thought the Johnson pick maybe was just a guy that they wanted and thought of maybe long term that they could develop. But I'm also excited kind of some of these undrafted free agents that we see up on the screen here, because I do think, again, when we talk competition at the wide receiver position, I think that you talk about competition at that defensive back position.
Defensive back looks very interesting to me. I can't wait to see some of the breakdowns. Yeah, Wallace, and then the kid from Clemson.
Carter, yeah.
Those guys I think can come in and at least make a competition out of the training camp process.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Honestly, it'll be fun. I know there's a lot of work to do still as far as post-draft when it comes to me and breaking down film and whatnot. But I am going to eventually get to those guys. Obviously, I'm going to start at the top and whatnot. So
I can't wait to see your breakdown on what was the quarterback there.
Right here?
I can't wait to see your breakdown on. I want to see a nice long scouting report on this guy.
I wouldn't hold your breath on that, all right?
All right.
Because by the time they have their mini camp or whatever, there's a good possibility he might not even be there.
He's just an arm for mini camp.
No offense to him, because I watched some of his film, and he's got some good traits. But I mean, I don't think
good for him to show up at a pro day and end up getting an undrafted. Contract. Somebody wants to look at you. You show up at a pro day, throw for some guys.
It was smart on his part, and I don't know who organized it, because he actually, his school, Shippensburg, is in Pennsylvania, and he actually was throwing to Deshaun Hamilton and those guys at the Penn State pro day. So
everybody's there. So
that was a smart play by him, honestly. That was a smart play, and that's probably what landed him on the roster, or actually an invite to the mini camp. So it'll be cool to see.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's some good names up there, and if you haven't been following, you can follow it, cover1.net. We're every time we see something, we're getting it up there and giving you a little bit of tidbits. If there's video, so it's kind of a one-stop shop for all those undrafted free agent guys. You can go check them out there, and we'll probably dig deeper into some of the guys as they start to make their way up the roster, if any guys look like they're going to stick or not. If you guys have any questions, now's a great time to get them in the chat box. We did have one question that came on before we went live here. It's from John Van Slyke. I hope I didn't butcher that, but it's even though our draft picks are looked at as future investments and the character/talent level of the players drafted last year and their impact they had in their rookie season, I was wondering how many of our draft picks this year will serve an immediate impact, and do you think the type, quotes, of guys they draft will shine through again this season? I was impressed with all of our rookies last year. Long question. But.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll keep it short. I do think that we kind of talked about, just throwing those guys in there right away. I think our need at Mike linebacker is obviously well known. I think that Edmonds is probably the guy that's going to make an immediate impact. The other guys, again, I think it's going to be a competition. So I don't think we're going to have the immediate impact that he expects. But, I mean, as the season goes on, and depending on where that record goes, a lot of these guys could start getting playing time. So obviously there's a lot of undrafted free agents they brought in. Obviously they had the draft, a good amount of picks. So that competition is going to be, that to me is, I love, not just analyzing it, but paying attention to it, because these guys are out there trying to, solidify a job. And you talk like it's Saran Neal, a guy that was drafted. I mean, he just had twins. I mean, so you don't think,
he wants to feed everybody.
Oh, he's hungry, and his family depends on him. So right. No, I know he's a draft pick, but you know what I mean when it comes to that. I don't think that. I mean, even Milano, a guy that was very productive in college, played many games in college, was obviously high on their board when it came to linebacker position with his athleticism and his traits. He's a guy that didn't get a lot of playing time till mid to late season. So. Mm-hmm. And of course he had to put in his time in special teams. So a lot of these guys are going to be in that role. They're going to have to earn their way, not just onto, the starting offense or defense. They're going to have to earn their way just on the special teams, because this is one of those, it's a position. I mean, special teams is an actual position. And right. This team, obviously they draft for it, year in and year out now. And they are high on special teams, because those are the type of characters they want, those guys that want to prove themselves. I know everyone says blue collar, but that's what a special teams player is, because he's not going to get the hype, but he has to earn every yard he runs down that field. So
right.
I do think that they're not going to be thrown in immediately. I think Edmonds would probably be the immediate impact.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there on Edmonds, and I do expect him to have the type of season that we saw out of Trey White a year ago, as far as the impact that he has on the defense from day one. And I fully expect him to compete for that Defensive Rookie of the Year. He'll be up there in the top 5 guys in the rookie class. The rest of them, though, I agree with you. They have to earn their spot through special teams. I know a lot of people get mad when they're signing free agents and stuff, and they talk about special teams. But if you're drifting towards the bottom half of that depth chart and the bottom half of the roster, you better play special teams. Like, that's the only reason to keep you on the 53. There's only 53 guys, and only 40 something get to play on Sundays, right? So you have to be able to participate in special teams and be effective. You can't be a liability in that. So there's nothing wrong with that. And I when you were talking about Milano and Neal, they're both 5th round picks. They both super aggressive on tape, and he might be that other guy that kind of what happened with Milano, where towards the end of the year you start to see him get pushed into the defense a little bit more, into those packages that you're talking about, which I don't know. Maybe I'm too high on him just from the highlights. So we'll see. I like it there. But
here's a question for you, Aaron, because it's not someone we probably watch a lot of film on, and there's not much out there as it is. And that's Keith Ford. We have Bills fan 7883 asking about Keith Ford. Yep. And we kind of talked about him quickly in the chat yesterday. Who is the running back that you said he kind of reminds you of? Yeah, just watching a highlight tape, to me, it did remind me of Carlos Williams a little bit. Just his running style. He's a little bit of a powerful guy, it looks like. And so to me, it stood out like a Carlos Williams type. Not saying that he will be that and won't have that type of impact. Who knows if he even makes the team, but red zone type of guy, it looks like to me. Did you see any of that after I said that? Did that ring true to you at all? Yeah, he's a short, powerful guy, and obviously he played in, more of like a spread scheme. And his best game last year was his first game versus UCLA, where he had a nice touchdown against them and some decent carries, but he leaked out into the flats a couple times. So I think he does have some receiving ability, but I mean, when it comes to him, I don't know if he's a guy that'll stick, but we can't really comment too much on it because, we're kind of film based and we didn't really get to watch much film on him. Yeah. And there isn't much right now out there that I've seen on him, right? He was a transfer from Oklahoma, I believe. So there wasn't much there at Oklahoma. He didn't really stick there. So 2 big schools. So there's definitely some talent there. But the way he ran, even though he's not the biggest guy in the world, he runs pretty straight. Straight lines, take straight lines. So that just reminds me of Carlos. Carlos didn't do a lot of juking around. He just found a spot and ran through it. And that's what I saw there. Looks like our boy Tyler has a question here. Will the new run scheme work well for Shady? Yeah, I mean, like I said, I do think it's going to be more of a vertical push. So our offensive line is going to try to establish a line of scrimmage onto their side. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of horizontal movement. And I think Shady's played in a scheme that, obviously under Roman and Lynn, that kind of ran some of the same concepts. You're going to see a lot of inside zone. You're going to see last year, if I remember correctly, because I just researched this, Dable at Alabama with those big hogs up front ran zone more than any other concept. I think it was like in the 50% range, 55% range. And that was split evenly. That 50% was split evenly between inside and outside zone. They ran gap and man concepts, so your powers and counter trays about 33% of the time. So I do think that Shady will be just fine. I think he's still going to rely on his obviously elite feet and change of direction. When you're having those guards pull, he's going to set up his blocks perfectly. I mean, I am not worried about Shady. If there's anyone I'm not worried about and a scheme, he's scheme proof. I mean, that's what I was just going to. I was just going to say, we've talked about this when the switch happened to Dennison, and people are having that argument of who fits well and what. And I think Shady is such a rare talent at the running back position that he can go to any team and be productive in any scheme. So I agree with you. I have zero concerns about him being able to get the ball and make the spectacular plays that we're used to seeing. And I hope that they give him the ball plenty. I think they need. Yeah, seriously, they're going to have to. Yeah. I mean, they're really going to have to, and they should because he's getting paid to do it. So give him the rock in the pass, in the run game. Just give him the rock, and that's our best bet to win, regardless who's playing quarterback, regardless of what receivers are out there. The offense goes through Shady. Yeah, and there's a good chance that going into this next year that he could be one of the leading receivers like he was a year ago.
I'd be totally fine with that too.
Yeah. No, and Tyler adds that he got the impression that Dennison's scheme, kind of led to Shady taking some shots. Honestly, I don't think that was the case at all. I think Shady never takes really big hits. I
Not
mean,
big ones, right?
I can't even think of one that comes to mind right now where he took a big lick. I mean, he'll take a couple a year, but I think it was one of those things where it was more of the offensive line, not necessarily Shady, that was struggling with that outside zone run game. So again, I think he's scheme proof. I think, yes, he is getting up there in age, but they're paying him to be one of the best. They didn't trade him like all those rumors were. Right. Offense goes through Shady, regardless of what scheme you're running.
Yeah, and I on the Dennison thing, what I saw was people were just meeting him more in the backfield than he's used to seeing, but I didn't see him take a lot of shots, and he still made a lot of guys miss and made the line look better than maybe they were at times.
I love this. I love what Tyler adds again and getting Shady involved more in the screen game. I think that is one area that Dennison, even Roman was kind of god awful when it came to screen game, and Lynn. Those guys only did screens to like the tight ends. I thought the timing last year for some reason was just not on when it came to the screen game. I think Dable, I think that's one of his strengths, whether it be those wide receiver screens, the tight end screens, and their halfback screens. They're usually in that Earhart-Perkins scheme. They're usually good screen teams, and it's something they spend a lot of time at as far as practice segments go. So I do think the screen game will look a lot better this year. So definitely a good point, man. Good point.
It's something, yeah, great point. And it's something I've been very much calling for on Twitter for the Bills to be using, because you see it every time you turn on somebody else's game. You see the screen game getting easy yards and making big plays for teams. I wanted it so bad when Sammy was here for them to just use some screens, and I think you got to get Shady out there. When I saw Wyatt Teller kind of in the screen game and the clips, that got me a little excited to say, hey, if they can use him that way, because I didn't think Eric Wood was very good at that, right? Moving around in that way. So if you get some interior linemen that can move out there and get some blocks, I'm all for it, man. Get Shady into space. That's all you need to do. Do we got any other questions here? It looks like people are just kind of chatting. So what do you got going for content for this week, man? I know every time I message you, you're knee deep in film. So I know you got some stuff going on.
Yeah, like I said, I'm working on Edmonds film. I only had 3 games cut up prior to the draft, so I circled back and just started from square one. So because, like I said, this is my favorite part, because being a former coach, I like to kind of project on how they're going to use these guys and how they were used in college. So I like to do a little background on the scheme they played in, some of the coaches that they played under, and we talked about Edmonds and playing under Bud Foster there at Virginia Tech. So I'm heavy into film right now when it comes to Tremaine Edmonds. And that's one thing, like, obviously I have to cut up the film and kind of behind the scenes talk here, but, I got to cut up the film. Then I got to organize it where, I'm talking his strengths, weaknesses, how they use them. And then, of course, I got to record over the top of it. So it's a lengthy process, and it's something that usually takes 50 to 60 hours to do. But I'm not rushing it, because I think this is going to be a good one.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait for it. And another guy I can't wait for you to dig a little deeper in, because I've seen you chime in when I'm having conversations with people about Josh Allen. I'm sure that's something you'll get to at some point after the Edmonds stuff too, because it's definitely a hot topic of how they're going to use him. So if you're looking for that type of content, looking for a little bit more in-depth at these guys and just the team in general, head over to cover1.net. You can get the notifications pushed to your browser, or you can download the app. Download the app on iOS, Android, and you get all the notifications there when we put out new content. Like I said, we're doing the undrafted free agents, so anytime those come up, all the people that have the app are getting those from us. And you can find us on all your social media platforms. Just search Cover One. You're going to find us. You guys know how to use social media, so I don't have to explain that part to you. But go ahead and go over to iTunes or wherever you get your podcast and subscribe, do all that. Head over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button if you're your first time watching this, and then click the little bell to receive notifications. Anytime we go live, it'll send a notification for you. You can jump in the chat box, chat with us, or chat with other Bills fans, man. It's fun. So come in, join the conversation. We'll be here every Wednesday. It might be Erik if we can get him out of the film room, but usually it's Nate and I and maybe a guest or two. So got a lot of cool things coming, man. The season's just starting to ramp up, so this is the fun time. You got anything else for us tonight, Erik?
No, that's it, man. Appreciate you having me on, and until next week.
All right, guys, take care. 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 right, guys, take care.